Hi everyone, hope you all doing well. Going a bit of scripted here. So, it's been a couple of days since the PS5 Pro was announced, and it was kind of a joke. Like, let's be real, $700 for a PS5 Pro seems a little bit excessive. And in my case, I actually have to pay $800, which is definitely excessive. So, and also, it doesn't even come with the vertical stand and the Blu-ray drive. You can buy those things separately, but it doesn't come included with the entire bundle, which is insane. It's fucking insane. We all know this. We all fucking made fun of this shit. Deservedly so. But I will say though that I have actually been hearing some pretty fucking wild takes. Mainly the whole idea that with the existence of the PS5 Pro, you know, you can no longer make the argument that consoles are just cheaper than PC. And the thing is, while I'm sure there are PC builds out there that you can make that are cheaper than a PS5 Pro, is it actually true that you can build a PC that's as fast as the PlayStation 5 Pro, that runs as well as the PS5 Pro? That, my friend, is a completely fucking different story. So, I'm going to use this website called Pesetiga. They have this little simulator here that I can use. And so, they're interesting. They actually already saved up some of my stuff. Um, because I actually did this before, and here's the thing. A lot of my picks here are going to be largely based on the specs of the PS5, and I want you to consider the following. So let's first start off with the CPU. Now, the interesting thing about the processor present in the PlayStation 5 is that since it's an 8-core, 16-thread CPU, you might think that the best. Oh, I forgot. They didn't even fucking. They're not even selling the Ryzen 7 anymore. But you might think that the correct pick, the correct CPU in this case, would be the Ryzen 7 3700, because the CPU also has 8 cores and 16 threads. Well, the thing is, there's a couple of things you have to consider. Firstly, the PS5 doesn't actually utilize every single core. From what I understand, I think it only really utilizes like 6.5 cores. And so, honestly, and there's also the fact that just the desktop variants of Zen 2 CPUs in general, they clock higher than the PS5, because the PS5 peaks at like, at least the base PS5, it peaks at like 3.5 gigahertz. While with desktop CPUs, specifically Zen 2 CPUs, you can get some of them to clock to like for example, in this case, 4.2 gigahertz. And the thing is, a lot of people generally tend to agree that the CPU that tends to reach the closest to the actual CPU performance of the PS5, especially if you check like a couple of benchmarks where people try to like create the quote unquote PS5 build, PC build, the Ryzen 5 3600, which is a 6-core CPU, so it does have less cores, but it does boost higher. And generally speaking, they're very similar in the amount of performance you tend to get. And also, to its credit, this CPU is probably also cheaper than the 3700, so it actually be in the PC's benefit to actually pick this processor. So we're gonna go with this one. Now, as for the motherboard, this is actually where I had problems. Now, initially, I picked this one, and my reasoning for picking this one was the fact that it's because of the PCIe. So the reason why this mattered to me is mainly due to the fact that a lot of cheap AM4 motherboards that you can find, the ones that are like around 100 or maybe even below 100, you can find those, but typically you tend to find those motherboards only have like PCIe Gen 3. And the problem with the problem with PCIe Gen 3 is that it bottlenecks both the GPU and also the SSD. And the reason for that being that the GPU that's present, for example, on the base PS5, is closer to the 6700 non XT. That's actually the GPU that we would use to make an equivalent PS5. And that GPU requires PCIe Gen 4. Now, that doesn't mean that on Gen 3 it won't work, but it's not going to run as potent as it can. And the same would be true for the SSD. In fact, I would actually argue that the SSD is actually even worse scenario, because one of the main driving point or one of the highlights of the PS5, even compared to the Xbox, is the fact that it has a beastly SSD. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, with the M4 platform, we are not going to find an SSD that's as fast as the PS5. That's just a fact. Unless we're going to AM5 and we're able to get like Gen 5 PCIe, maybe we might be able to. Are they even selling Gen 5 NVMe SSDs? I think they might be. Let's actually get to the GPU. Because the GPU is, let's be real, the main thing about the PS5 Pro that's actually a huge benefit over the base PS5. And this is where we have a problem. Now, there are two things to consider here. The first being that we're just going to exclude 8 gigabytes GPUs entirely. So, for example, some people might think, oh, cheap in quotations. Technically speaking, these GPUs aren't cheap. But some might argue, hey, you can find some pretty nice builds with the 4060. Let's go with non-TI because that one's cheaper. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, these GPUs we're not even gonna consider because this is 8 gigabytes of this one is this one's 8 gigabytes of VRAM. We are not going with an 8 gigabyte VRAM card. Okay, we've all been seeing the benchmarks over the past year. Like a lot of games, especially the PS next gen games, they're having VRAM limitations. Like a lot of them have very high VRAM requirements. So the bare minimum is 12. We're not gonna pick the 3060 because no. The one that I'm gonna pick that is probably the safest pick that we can go with is the oh fuck, this actually went down in price. Sorry, it went up in price. It was on discount when I checked this. Regardless, I guess technically speaking, this is the price. I'm gonna go with this one later, but the reason why I'm picking this one is that, at least based on the leaks, the GPU present on the PS5 is kind of like a mix between RDNA 3 and RDNA 4. From what I've seen in like more recent information shared around, it seems to be a lot closer to RDNA 4, which actually makes picking this GPU at a bit of a disadvantage over the actual PS5 Pro, because aside from having a weaker architecture, in terms of ray tracing, the PS5 Pro is probably going to have some pretty notable improvement in ray tracing. And you have to consider the fact that the PS5 in general tends to be a lot more efficient with ray tracing, even compared to RDNA 2 cards, the base PS5. And so when you get to the PS5 Pro, it could potentially be even more efficient than actual RDNA 4. But regardless, RDNA 4, at least based on what we've been seeing, like it has some pretty major uplifts in ray tracing. So picking this is actually a major fucking bottleneck. But unfortunately, it's the closest one we can go because we can't go with an Nvidia card because architecture-wise, they're very different. It's also a lot harder to predict, like trying to like pick an equivalent RTX card to put against the PS5 Pro because there's just so many unknown variables. We don't even know if even the ray tracing performance is going to be necessarily equivalent to some of the RTX cards, and whether or not they're also going to be equivalent to the rest of performance. So I feel like there's just too much guessing work, and we're already kind of going with speculation even here. But at least this is the closest GPU that we can find that actually matches. Now the motherboard here is still having compatibility issues. I'm still not entirely sure why. Does it say here why? I'll have to check this later. But anyway, now let's go with RAM. So here's the thing. I'm actually going to exclude this. And let me explain you why. The reason why I want to exclude this is because this is actually not what we should go with. Now, I might be thinking, oh, well, why not? The PS5 has 16 gigabytes of RAM. It does. But it's unified memory. As in, it's a mix of both system RAM and video RAM. And it's unified. And the thing is, now you might think, oh, well, that just makes PC even better because you're combining the VRAM of the GPU as well with the the DRAM from your system. So that means that we have more RAM. But the thing is, in this context, having unified memory is actually better because while the PS5 has a lower memory than what you can build on PC, the thing is, the PS5 is very efficient with how it performs memory allocation, with how it exchanges data between the CPU and the RAM and the SSD. Like it's just very efficient with a lot of that because like a lot of the components are soldered to the motherboard. They're interconnected. Like it just has overall better synergy. Meanwhile, with PC, you tend to have a lot more IO bottlenecks, and it gets to the point where even if you want to reach like similar performance as you find on a PS5, while in terms of average frame rates, maybe you might be able to reach that, but once you start getting to things like the 1% lows and stuff like that, you might experience like some IO bottlenecks. You might experience some limitations with the memory bandwidth of the GPU. Like all of those things could end up creating like these very specific bottlenecks that just ends up making the experience just not as smooth as what you can get on a PS5, even though technically speaking, you are actually getting more RAM. And so realistically, what we should do here is actually go with 32 gigabytes because at that point we're a lot more capable of sort of overcompensating these issues with the IO. So amongst these, I think it's fine to go with I think no, not this one. I want a little bit faster. This one's faster, I guess. Um there's also this one that's 3600. I wonder if they have and yeah, the maximum that we can find here is 3600. So I guess we can go with this. And since we removed the RAM here, we'll go somewhere around 1100. Um, one other thing, the motherboard is still being a bitch. Let's actually remove this because this is starting to fucking piss me off. All right, I think I was able to pick a pretty decent one, which is this ASUS motherboard, uh, B550. I think it's fine. This one is Gen 4 on both the 16-lane PCIe and also the storage one, so I think it should be fine. Oh, well, look at that! Now we have a lot more options. Uh, I think this one was a bit closer to what we were looking for. Yeah, I think we can pick this one. That's good. It will increase the price though. Now we're getting to 1200. But honestly, I'm glad because the previous motherboard just had some fucking was actually limiting the amount of results that we could get here. So we're gonna go with Gen 4, and we're also gonna go with 2 TB. We're gonna need the fastest one here. Alright, so here's where things get kind of complicated. I did actually find some pretty fast ones, and it's cool. I think it's nice. I think I'm gonna go with this one. This one goes up to like 7,000, which is nice. But there is one thing they have to take into consideration, which is the fact that I don't know if we're actually gonna get this speed. I'm not entirely sure if we're even going to get to these speeds, but who knows? We might. Regardless, it's best if we get the fastest one because it's just. I mean, actually, how fast is the PS5 SSD? So I guess here it says that the read speed is 5.5 gigabytes per second, but with compressed data, it can go somewhere around 8 to 9 gigabytes. So this SSD then only goes up to like 7,000. It doesn't really specify if it applies to it. Well, look at that. The read speed is actually 2,000. Oh wait, sorry, this is the wrong SSD. I'm sorry. Did I pick 2? I'm sorry. That's actually the wrong one. This is the one I was looking for. So the read speed here is 7,000, and the write speed is 7,000. It doesn't really mention anything regarding compression. So, I guess the read speed is faster here. But again, I'm still not entirely sure if I'll actually reach this speed. Just because I don't know. I guess I'd have to test this myself, but I have my own skepticism as far as whether or not this motherboard would actually handle this level of speed. But regardless, cooler. I picked this one. Should be fine. Now PSU. I think the last time I picked this one, but even though I think this is a good PSU, it's probably the one that I would go with. I want to see if I can find a cheaper one. Like, I'm hoping to get like a 750, but the last time I checked, they didn't have this option. So the thing is, I think the reason why they won't give me options for 750 is because of this GPU. Because AMD recommends a bare minimum of 700 watts, and so uh, a part of me wants to believe that maybe if we go with 750 watts, it should be fine. But I don't know. Maybe there is a good reason for why PCDK is only giving me results starting with 850, and I guess for now I'm gonna trust them. I'm gonna trust them at the word. And did I just excluded did I just excluded my previous option? Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with this one. There are some cheaper options there, but I don't know if I want to trust these like brands that I'm not fully familiar with. Like maybe I would do this if I was like building my own build for like fucking virtualization or for testing and stuff like that. But for something that for something that I would want to be like a reliable gaming PC, I would rather have something that I actually trust. Now, as for the operating system, this doesn't fucking matter. Just use Windows 11 for free. So I already picked the peripherals. This one also includes a mouse and keyboard. I went with the cheaper ones. No, this mouse, for example, costs like €9, and the keyboard costs like 1,500. So in total, I'm getting around 1,200, close to 1,300. So it's quite a bit more expensive than the PS5 Pro. But at that point, you could also make the argument that, oh, since with the PS5 Pro you have to buy a bunch of additional accessories, then that ends up making it even more expensive. And while that is true, at the same time, it's not like you need those accessories. Like, you don't need an extra controller, you don't need an extra stand. You might need an extra Blu-ray, but since we're comparing with PC that doesn't even have physical media in the first place, I'm gonna try to keep things in the realm of digital games. And so again, you don't need an extra controller. Uh, I guess if you want to play with fucking earphones, that might be an issue. But other than that, I feel like if we're making the argument that you could end up bloating up the price with accessories, I feel like you could make a very similar argument with PC, because you can also buy some pretty fucking expensive PC uh, accessories. So I don't know. It's not. I don't think. For example, I don't buy accessories. Like, the only accessories that I buy for the PS5 are extra controllers, and those same extra controllers, I end up using them on PC anyway. So I don't even consider them exclusive to PS5. I use them on other stuff. So to me, it makes up. And so the other thing you can mention is the online, and I think the argument of paying for online is a pretty compelling one. But at the same time, I would also argue that a lot of that kind of depends on the spending habits of a consumer. So, for example, this is a very weird example, but I want you to kind of take into consideration. So, if we actually look at the price of PlayStation Plus, the essential one, you'll find that this is €71. Now, let's say you are someone that buys, let's go with 12 full price games a year, which to me is actually a lot. I would never spend that much. But let's just say you buy 12 full price games a year. Now, if you're on PlayStation, if you spend an extra €71, then that would be the equivalent of buying 13 full price games a year. Now, if you're intelligent with the way you spend money, you could just scale back on the number of games you're willing to buy for the PS5. So instead of buying 12, you buy 11. And then the other one, you wait until it's on sale. And even in the case of the PlayStation Plus subscription, and this is something that I personally do, I just wait until this shit is on sale and just buy them cheap. And I don't know. I feel like I do think that's a good argument, because here's the thing. I agree with you that paying to play online is really fucking stupid. It didn't used to be like this with the PS3. It started with the PS4. It didn't end with the PS5. And I think that's ridiculous. I don't think you need to. I don't think there's any reason for why PlayStation or Xbox should charge you to play online, especially when you consider the fact that they don't even really do a lot to actually host a lot of the servers that run on these multiplayer games. That's still largely done on the developer side. Like they just provide the framework to, you know, just allow these consoles to play online with their servers. So it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to charge consumers for that. But at the same time, I would also make the argument that if this is the thing that's keeping you from playing on consoles, I feel like there are intelligent ways that you can actually still spend this amount and not lose a lot by playing on consoles. And also, frankly speaking, if you ask me, I'm someone that has a PS5, a gaming build, and Nintendo Switch. I buy games for all of these platforms, but even when you consider that, I feel like there are some people out there that only has one platform, including PC. Like there are people out there that are probably exclusive PC gamers that spend a lot more money than I do because I don't buy a lot of games every year. And so to me, like paying for PlayStation Plus isn't a huge expense. I don't think I should pay for it. And I understand why some people feel frustrated by the idea that you would pay online. I do, but I also think that when you look at this from the perspective of this is the equivalent of buying a full price game a year, then just I don't know. I feel like if you really wanted to, you could probably spend your money in intelligent ways. So that's the argument that I would make. Now, of course, do I think you should buy PS5 Pro? Not at all. I still think this is extremely expensive. There's really no reason, especially because uh, I've seen the games that are apparently going to be PS5 Pro enhanced, and frankly speaking, it's not a lot. Like, and this is kind of a thing with even the PS4 Pro. In fact, I would actually say the PS4 Pro probably had even more. It probably had a lot more games that were PlayStation 4 enhanced, and also had a bit more years because the PS5 Pro is coming out, I think, a year later than the PS4 Pro did. But I don't know. Something that probably would make me at least consider buying a PS5 Pro would be if PlayStation 4 games were also PS5 Pro enhanced. But I am getting the feeling that that's not gonna fucking happen. So, for example, games like, I don't know, Sakura Wars. Is it gonna run at like native 4K 60 FPS with the PS5 Pro? No, no, it's not gonna happen. We're not gonna see these kinds of optimization, and that's unfortunate. Like I wish that would be the case. That probably would at least somewhat convince me. But then the other thing I also have to consider with the PS5 Pro is the fact that, uh, not so much the fact that it doesn't come with a Blu-ray drive, but the fact that when you buy a Blu-ray drive, which it is modular, you can actually buy it separately. But even then, you attach that shit to a PS5 Pro, and it requires you to connect to the internet in order to do the initial setup. And I find that shit to be fucking disgusting. I think that in the world of physical media, any reliance on the internet is gross. I think that any company doing that should be fucking ashamed of themselves. Requiring your consumers to connect to your fucking servers that'll get shut down in the future, I think that's disgusting. That's also not exactly incentivizing me to buy PS5 Pro because I know it's gonna have an online requirement. I know it's for the initial setup, and I know it's to avoid people fucking pirating using third-party Blu-ray drives to pirate. I get those things. I understand. I understand. I still think it's shit. But anyway, regardless of all that, I do still believe that on PC you're spending a little bit more. And if you want me to be honest, like if I look at the overall configuration, CPU, let's say it's faster. It probably is faster, but it has slower RAM because PS5 has unified memory. That's a bit, at least from what I check, it's GDDR6. So that's faster memory than this. Um, it has a more powerful GPU than this, definitely. Um, in terms of the SSD, where is it? In terms of the SSD, this one is a bit debatable. I would have to personally check myself to see if a PC would actually reach 7,000, but I have my own doubts. And even then, in terms of data that's actually compressed, the PS5 is still faster. But of course, in terms of uncompressed data, theoretically the PS5 is slower, but again, I'd have to see real life examples for me to even believe that, because a part of me doesn't believe that. But anyway, I do still, in my personal opinion, you are kind of building a PC that's a little bit weaker than the PS5 Pro. Sorry, and yet it's more expensive. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that I think you should buy the PS5 Pro, nor would I even make the argument that you shouldn't build a PC. I love PC. Like, I think, in fact, I want you to build a PC. I think building a PC is one of the most fucking magical things in the world. But I also think that people need to be a little bit fucking logical with some of the shit that people say. And the other thing is, we're talking about all of this. We're talking about all of this fucking shit. But do bear in mind that the PlayStation 5 Slim still exists. So if you want to make the fucking, affordable argument, this shit still exists. Sony is not going to stop selling the PlayStation 5 Slim. So if you want a cheap gaming device, this still exists. This is still very compelling. Well, aside from the fact that there aren't really a lot of games, but this still fucking exists. So I don't think that the whole, gaming consoles no longer being affordable thing is real. I think in general PC is still more expensive. But I would still say that if you are someone who's interested in PC gaming, I would wholly encourage you to get into it, because I think it's a magical world. But you do have to take into consideration the fact that at least for the initial build, like the initial price that you're paying, it's gonna be more expensive than a console. And it might be worth it to you, but maybe if you're someone that for the most part just wants to have a gaming device to put on your living room and stress free, fairly convenient device that isn't gonna make you think too much. Like, you don't have to fucking think about shit like troubleshooting and stuff like that. You don't have to think about optimizing the fucking game, optimizing the graphics side, which these are all things that I can deal with. But maybe some people can't, and to those people, maybe it might be worth considering at least the PlayStation 5 base version. The Pro, I still think it's way too expensive, and you should probably wait until this thing drops in price. And I highly doubt it's even going to drop in price anyway, because a part of me believes that Sony isn't going to sell a lot of units here, and they're kind of just expecting the hardcore fans to buy these. So I wouldn't really expect them to drop this thing in price. So for now, I would mostly advise you to buy the base PS5. And I mean, like, look, this is still a fine console. Like, it's not like you're not going to play games at 60 FPS with the base PS5. It's just that you're gonna get higher performance on the PlayStation 5 Pro. But for the most part, a lot of video games are still going to take the base PS5 into consideration. You're not gonna suddenly see games like run like garbage on the PS5 base version just because the Pro exists. No, developers are still going to be considerate of the original version. So I don't think you should worry about that in specific. This is not like PC where the second like a new hardware comes in, developers are just like, fuck the old. Like, people should just upgrade the consoles, like the PCs. Like, no, that's not what happens on consoles. They're a lot more considerate when it comes to that. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share. I had to re-record this because the original recording had really fucky audio. This one is probably also gonna have really fucking audio, but it's probably gonna be better. But anyway, that's all I have to share. Take care.